Thank you very much. And let me take this opportunity to introduce mi familia, mi esposa Jane, my son Levy, son David, daughter Karina, and Raul Grijalva is my brother in heart. My granddaughter Ella, and my grandson Dylan. Okay, please, everyone sit. Thank you so much for coming. And by the way, I am delighted to be here with Congressman Raul Grijalva from Arizona. I think all of you know that Raul has been, throughout his political life, one of the leaders in the Congress in the fight for immigrant justice, in the fight for racial justice, in the fight for economic justice and social justice. So, Raul, thank you so much for what you have done for our country. Let me just say a very few words, and then we'll get the panel going. I'm running for president because the truth is, given the many crises that we face as a nation, it is just too late for establishment politics and establishment economics. We need real change today. And it is not credible to me that we can have candidates who take millions of dollars from Wall Street and other special interests and then tell us they're going to stand up to those powerful special interests and create a government that works for all of us. Now, in terms of immigration issues and issues of particular concern to the Latino community, number one, I want you all to know that I am the son of an immigrant, first generation. My father came from Poland at the age of 17 to escape poverty. He came to this country with no money. He came to this country not speaking a word of English, but he became a very proud American because he saw what the United States could do, this country could do for his two sons. Never made much money, but he was a very proud American because of the opportunities this country gave him. Where we are today, and I know we'll go into this at greater length, is in terms of immigration policy. Everybody here knows our immigration system is totally broken. No one debates that. And before I even get to immigration reform, I want to say that as a United States Senator and as President of the United States, I am going to do, and have done, and will do, everything I can to combat the bigotry and the ignorance of Donald Trump and people like that. All of you know who know American history, the struggle that this country has gone through for hundreds of years to fight against discrimination. We had to deal with slavery. We had to deal with the terrible deeds that we did to the Native American people, the prejudice against Latinos, against Italians, against Irish, against Jews. And we had hoped, especially after electing the first African-American president in our history, that the blatant bigotry that we're seeing today was behind us. But apparently it is not. And it is incumbent upon all of us to stand up to Donald Trump and to tell him that his bigotry, his trying to divide us up, his insults to the Mexican and Latino community, to the Muslim community, to women, to veterans, to African Americans, that is not what this country is about. We will not accept it for 1 second. Secondly, everybody here knows we have 11 million undocumented people in this country. And what many of us know, not everybody knows, is that many of those people who are out working today are being exploited. And I know we're going to get into that issue in a little bit of length. But there are people in California today, undocumented people, who are being cheated of their wages, they're being underpaid, they're being overworked, and we know that they cannot stand up for their rights because they are undocumented. And that is why, among many other reasons, together we will pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. I was at, I don't know if any of you have been there, probably you have, but to Friendship Park in San Diego. People been there? And it's a park located right on the ocean. And in one sense, it is a beautiful area. You're looking right out to the Pacific Ocean. On the other hand, it is a very tragic and sad location because there is a fence there. And apparently, as I understand it, on weekends, they open up the fence and they allow people from both sides to come together. But the fence and the screening is so tight that people cannot embrace each other. The only physical contact that a husband and a wife or a mother and a child can have is literally by sticking their pinky through a very tight screen. And how tragic is that? To see husbands on one side and wives on the other side, moms on one side and children on the other side. The function of real immigration reform must be to unite families, not divide families. And that is why we will end the current ill-advised deportation policies that currently exist. And if Congress does not do what the American people want them to do, I'm not saying everybody does, but the majority of the American people want real immigration reform. If Congress does not do that, then I will use all of the powers of the presidency through executive orders to do the best that I can do. But clearly the preferable and long-term solution is comprehensive immigration reform. Last point. Latino community is by and large a working class community. And like the rest of the American working class, people are struggling to put bread on the table and to make ends meet. I believe that we have an economic agenda, not just an immigration reform agenda, but an economic agenda that makes sense and works for the Latino community. What does it mean? Very briefly. It means that if you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty. We raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And we make sure that women get equal pay for equal work. That we create millions of good-paying jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, our water systems, our wastewater plants, our roads, our bridges, our rail system. We can put 13 million people in this country back to work at good wages and make this country more productive and safer. The United States is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border in Burlington, Vermont. All the people in California have health care as a right. If elected president, we're going to fight for a Medicare for all health care system which guarantees health care to all people as a right. We have hundreds of thousands of bright young people in this country who cannot afford to go to college and many others who are leaving school $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 in debt. In the year 2016, when we talk about public education, we should understand that that must mean making public colleges and universities tuition-free. This is what I want to see. Yes, sweetheart. Okay, I want to see, it's funny, I was just going to talk about that. I want to see the children of California and Vermont and America. I want to see those kids who study hard and do well in school. I want to see those children know that if they study hard, they will be able to get a college education regardless of the income of their families. One other point, and then I'll stop and we'll get on with the panel. And I know that many of you are deeply concerned about our criminal justice system, all right? And you should be, because it's a broken system. We have a broken immigration system. We have a broken criminal justice system. Here's the facts. The facts are that in this country today, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. You all know that? We have 2.2 million people, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American. Now here's something else that we have in this country. We have communities in our inner cities, African American communities, Latino communities. We have communities in rural America where the youth unemployment rate is 30, 40, 50%. That means you have kids who are 17, 18 years of age. They leave high school, and you know what? There are no jobs available to them. And when you have young people who have no jobs, who are not in school, who are hanging out on street corners, bad things can happen. And that is why I very strongly believe that as a nation, we should invest in our young people in jobs and education, not jails or incarceration. Okay, that's a little bit of what I wanted to say. Arturo, you take it away.
Thank you, Senator. And before we get started with the first panelist, I want to recognize one of the very first elected officials that came out in support of Senator Sanders' candidacy, and that's Council Member Gil Cedillo. If you could please stand. Councilmember Cedillo has a long history of advocating for immigrant communities on driver's licenses and a series of policies. So thank you, Councilmember Cedillo. The first question comes from a longtime immigrant rights activist reigning from the state of Oaxaca, Mexico. She's of indigenous ancestry and has been a strong advocate for indigenous communities both in the United States and in Mexico, and is going to share a story about the impact of trade and indigenous backgrounds as it relates to the immigrant community. Romero.
Padiurs, Benezana Sanders. Just grante ko ba benorat chalguchup shundija that chak chebenachga. I will interpret for myself now.
Very good, because I haven't a clue what you said, so it'd be.
Good afternoon, Senator Sanders. My name is Odilia Romero, indigenous Venezuelan. I was born in a Mexican state with the largest indigenous population, the state of Oaxaca. My community is up in the highlands, where we say in my native language, we wake up walking through the clouds. We are the people of the clouds. Out of the 68 indigenous languages that are spoken in the Mexican Republic, 16 are spoken in our state. Mexico is a multicultural, multilingual country where 7.2 million Mexicans speak an indigenous language, and 11.3% speak only an indigenous language. One out of 5 Mexicans is indigenous, according to the Mexican Human Rights Commission. I come from a sacred place where now very few people live. It's a ghost town, because most of us are here in Los Angeles. Indigenous communities are rich in culture and natural resources. However, every day we are forced to leave to the U.S. due to U.S. agricultural dumpings, military aid, and the drugs on drugs. And our lands are being taken by transnational companies, many of them U.S. owned. When we stand up for our land and human rights, we are threatened with death by the Mexican police and army, as we saw the 43 missing students in Guerrero, in Ayotzinapa, who were mostly indigenous. Many members of the Mexican army and police are trained in the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation, not to wage a war against drugs, but to wage a war against indigenous communities in 3 of the most indigenous states, Oaxaca, Chiapas, and Guerrero. Many of us are forced to have starvation salary working for US companies in Mexico. We go from being landowners to becoming low-wage workers. That is the reason why we come to the US. It's the economic policies. In the US, we are in the same condition. We make more than 20% of the agricultural labor force in California. We face discrimination, structural racism, and labor exploitations, along with racism from our other Mexican brothers and sisters. We have integrated to the US culture. In this audience, you will find Oaxacans that have graduated from Berkeley, Harvard, Stanford, UCLA, not only with bachelor's degrees, but also with master's and PhDs. We contribute economically and culturally to the social fabric of the United States. We are proud to call ourselves American because we are the original owners of the American continent. Yet, we are so proud of being from this great country. We also have the right to be treated equally while being different. For this reason, I ask you, what will you and your team do to build a broad, inclusive coalition that acknowledges our diverse community and create policies that recognizes indigenous people's right to stay home and making migration voluntary instead of a forced necessity? Will you ensure that we renegotiate NAFTA so it no longer leads to poverty and displacement in our communities in Oaxaca? And prohibit any future agreements like TPP that increases unemployment, low wages, poverty, and displacement of indigenous people all over. Thank you and welcome to Oaxaca, California.
Thank you.
Gakarencho Berni. Can everybody repeat Gakarencho Berni? And you're gonna say, Gakarencho de. Gakarencho Berni. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your presentation. You covered a whole lot of area. All important, truly important. You know, one of the things, let me start off at the end and we'll touch on some of the other issues, not all, but some of them. Trade. Our current trade policies, going back to NAFTA, have not only been a disaster for workers in this country, they have been a disaster in terms of NAFTA for workers and farmers in Mexico. And what has happened, and as you have indicated, what has happened and what these trade agreements are part of a global effort for a race to the bottom. Some of you remember a guy named Jack Welch. That name mean anything to you? Welch was the former head of General Electric, one of the largest corporations in America. This is what he said. This is what he said before he got a $400 million retirement package. What he said is, if I had my druthers, if I had my wishes, I would put our manufacturing plants, GE's manufacturing plants, on a barge, on a boat. And I would take them to those parts of the world where wages were the lowest. And if somebody could go lower than Mexico, we'll go there. If you go lower than China, you go to Vietnam. If you go to lower in Vietnam, we'll find the place in the world where we can employ people for pennies an hour. So you're looking at somebody, unlike Secretary Clinton, who opposed all of these disastrous trade agreements, which have cost us millions of jobs. Now, that is what those trade agreements have done in this country. What they have done in Mexico is to drive small family farmers off of their land. There are communities in Mexico where you no longer can find men there or farms there because they have shut down because they're unable to compete against cheap corn coming in from the United States. So you're seeing a policy which has hurt workers in this country, hurt farmers in Mexico. We will together transform our trade policies so that they work for the working people of this country, that they work for the poor people of other countries, not just for the CEOs of large corporations. That's our trade policy. You know, as I go around the country, and I've learned a lot, because I have met with many people from diverse backgrounds. Point number one, we should be incredibly proud of the fact that in this country, unlike many other countries, we have folks from hundreds of countries in every continent on earth coming to the United States of America. Donald Trump does not understand it, but our diversity is our strength. Think what your people are adding to the culture of this country. Think what people from Africa are adding to the culture of this country, from Europe, from Asia. That is our strength, and we have got to build on that strength and not allow people to attack that strength. And by that, what I mean is all of us are proud of where we come from. I just talked literally last night, to a group of Native Americans who understand that one of the challenges that their young people have is they have broken the roots from where they come from. As human beings, it is important that all of us know where we come from, that we maintain the languages that our people knew, our culture, that we protect the sovereign rights of people and the promises that were made to people. So to get to your very first question, whether it is dealing with the immigrant population or any other group, we have many problems in this country, and anybody thinks that I or anybody else who might become president knows all the answers, you're very wrong. The people who know the answers are the people who are doing the work, who are living the lives every single day. And what a good leader does, what a good, smart leader does for his or her own self-interest, you bring in the communities to say, all right, what do you see the problems? What do you see the solutions? How do we go forward? That has always been part of what I have tried to do, and certainly that is what I would do with the immigrant population. Thank you.
Our next presenter is a mother. She's undocumented, and she's fighting for immigrant rights for undocumented families for a very long time. Please help me introduce Betty.
Hi, my name is Betty Castillo, and I'm undocumented mother. I could be a DAPA parent, but you know what happened, so I just have a hope. I've been living here for 30 years, and I never have that hope that I'm gonna be a citizen. And when I start talking about, immigration reform, S744, DAPA, I have a hope. I want to go back to my country. I want to go, get out from this city, because I feel like I'm in a cage. I can pass San Diego because it's a checkpoint. I could be deported. I can go Arizona because it's another checkpoint. It's a lot of checkpoints. I feel trapped. And I feel like every day when I get off from my home, I don't know if I'm going to come back. Before I was okay, I was working, I was fine, but after all these hopes, all this, that Obama promised us, right? And he just deporting our families. He's separating our families. He's tearing our families apart. And when I see all these things, make me think what's going to happen. I'm so afraid. I have to come every day and talk with people and pretend that I'm strong, but I'm not strong. I'm afraid. I'm really afraid to be deported at this time. After 30 years, I've been living in this country more time than I've been living in my country, so I feel American. I feel that I deserve to be here. And I work and I do a lot of things that I think I deserve something, but the reality is like I don't have nothing, right? I don't have hope, I don't have nothing. So I'm really afraid to be separated. I have a mom that is from Tijuana. It's in Tijuana right now. From Dreamers Moms Tijuana is Yolanda Barona. This lady called me once and she was deported. She asked me, Betty, what are you gonna do? Tell me to cross the desert. And if you told me to cross, I'm gonna cross the desert. And if I die, I'll prefer to die than be separated from my family. And I was like, no, you don't have to do that. I feel like a mom. I feel like I was her. So I keep talking to her, and now they are fighting to come back to this country. So I feel like what's gonna happen for all these people? What's gonna happen? And my question is, what you gonna do to family reunification, to family separation, to stop all deportations? That's my question. It's my concern. What's gonna happen with us?
Well, first of all, Betty, thank you for your courage, and thank you for your willingness in your own difficult times to help other people. All right, so number one, as I mentioned earlier, our immigration policy must be to unite families, not to divide them. I will end the deportation policies that currently exist, so you do not have to live in fear. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, a number of months ago. Raul was there as well. And I will never forget, sometimes you see things. We met with about a half a dozen teenage kids, Latinos, young ladies. Tears were coming down their cheeks because they expressed the same fear that Betty just expressed, that on any given day they could be separated from their mother or their father. And they live in fear, all right? So number one, we will end the current deportation policies. And number two, we will fight for the comprehensive immigration reform that we need. You've been in this country 30 years. Well, if you have been in this country 30 years, you are an American in every sense, and we have to make that legal as well. And if Raul's colleagues, Republicans in the House, refuse to do the right thing, we will look at all of our legal options in terms of expanding immigration rights through the executive powers that the president has. So that's what we will do. But thank you very much. Raul, did you want to add anything to that? Or?
I think you more than covered it, Senator.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
And our final presenter is a representative of a day labor network that organizes for organizes immigrant workers all throughout Southern California, and has been doing this for a very long time. He's a well-recognized leader all across the country. Please allow me to introduce Pablo Alvarado. Adelante.
Gracias. Gracias, Arturo. Buenas tardes, Senator Sanders. Buenas tardes, compañeros y compañeras. I am a Mexican from El Salvador. So, I can say, bienvenido a la Casa del Mexicano, Senator Sanders. Welcome to the Casa del Mexicano, and welcome to Los Angeles, a city that is in the road to becoming a full sanctuary city. We're not there yet. Isn't that right, Councilman Cedillo? We're in that way, right? Even if Donald Trump doesn't like it, we are going to become a full sanctuary city. And with you in the White House, our country will become a sanctuary for everyone. So I have had the honor to work with the men and women who stand on public sidewalks and in front of home improvement stores, and honored to work with low-wage workers, together with many colleagues who are here in this room today and many colleagues across the country. We've been able to set up many worker centers. And in these worker centers, which is the face of the new labor movement, in many of these centers, what our organizers do, we make sure that we send people to job assignments. We make sure that if they don't get pay, that they get their wages back. That if they're injured at the workplace, that at least there is a basic remedy for those circumstances. But it's definitely not enough. We connect, my organization connects 70 of these worker centers. So we make sure that at least in these centers, that the rights of workers are respected. And not just their rights as workers, but their immigrant rights as well. Before being immigrant, people are workers, and the rights of workers don't end at the US and Mexico border. So as we fight to improve wages and working conditions, and thank you for being one of the champions for the 5 for 15. Is that right? But there are many abuses that go unanswered in this, in our country. And every day, millions of dollars are stolen from workers. And somehow, our country has made the decision, our country has built an incredible infrastructure to persecute the young man who steals a candy at a local store, particularly if that man is a young person of color. We have an incredible infrastructure. Our city spends half of our budget in police officers and persecuting people like that. But the infrastructure to persecute employers who steal the workers' wages is very minimum. In California itself, there's one investigator per county that the State Labor Commission has. It doesn't really make sense. So as much progress as we've made nationally in pushing for the 5 for 15, we got to make sure that those decisions that our council members have made at the local and at the state level get enforced. And as a representative of immigrant workers, the best way, one of the best ways to start making sure that we enforce those laws is by making sure that every undocumented worker who is cheated of his or her wages, every undocumented worker whose workplace rights are violated, that they have an opportunity to fix their immigration status. When an undocumented migrant is a victim of a violent crime, they can apply for a U visa. So what about if they are victims of a workplace violation? Why shouldn't they? Would you support that effort, Senator Sanders?
Absolutely. Let me just, if I might, very briefly tell you a story. In 2007, I had heard about the exploitation of undocumented workers in Florida. And I went down there, and what I saw in a town where they grow tomatoes, tomato workers, literally the day that I got into that town, a contractor, a labor contractor, was being arrested by the U.S. attorney, being charged by U.S. attorney. Do you know for what crime this was? I think 2007. You know what the crime was? Slavery. Can you believe that? In Immokalee, Florida, when I went down there, just coincidentally, there was a contractor who was holding people in involuntary servitude, slavery, forcing them to work against their own will. And that was not the first case of slavery brought in that area. What I saw were workers who were clearly exploited, who were out on the fields, not getting paid for getting out on the fields. It rained, you didn't get paid. Their working conditions were abysmal. Their housing and health care access was terrible, all right? Now, I need your help on this. I want to ask you a question. My impression is we just came back from the Delano area, where I had the opportunity to go to the home where Cesar Chavez was on his hunger strike in order to protest the exploitation of farm workers and pesticides that they were exposed to. My impression is that even today, while the situation is better than it was when Chavez was active, that today thousands of workers are being cheated from their wages as farm workers. Is that accurate? All right. All right. I'm sorry? Right. And the reason, and I know this is what you are combating right now, is if you have no legal rights and I pay you $3 an hour, what are you going to do about it? Right? You're not going to go to the Department of Labor. You're not going to go to the local police department, right? Then that's what you are trying to reform. So the idea of opposing vigorously this type of labor exploitation of undocumented workers is the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. But you know what else it is about? And I know that there are some workers who are not undocumented. How does it impact them? Well, it does impact them. Because if employers can pay workers starvation wages and have no rights, why am I going to pay somebody else a living wage? It is part of what we call the race to the bottom. So we have got to fight to make sure that undocumented workers get treated fairly and have real recourse. Your recourse is somebody cheats them, that gives them legal status. Is that what you're saying? Good. I think that makes sense. And by the way, unless I'm mistaken on this, you got employers out there who are laughing all the way to the bank, right? I mean, they're ripping off workers, making a whole lot of money rather than paying legal wages, and we have got to deal with that, and we have to hold those workers, those employers accountable.
All right. So we're now going to go to a few questions from the audience. And Cesar over here, our all-star in the Latino outreach team, is going to select the first question.
I want to make a statement first from one of your great supporters.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es María Pérez y vengo de Ventura, California. Y nosotros estamos soportando a Bernie en Ventura, California, en el Bella Arts, saliendo a tocar puertas porque creemos que necesitamos un presidente como usted. Somos indocumentados, yo soy madre soltera y a mí me preocupa dejar a mi hijo que está en el colegio de Santa Bárbara y no tenga quien lo soporte. Y también estoy entrando a estudiar al colegio de Santa Bárbara y a mí me gustaría saber cómo nos puede apoyar porque necesitamos muchas oportunidades y de verdad queremos un presidente como usted y lo estamos apoyando, saliendo a tocar puertas y diciéndole a la gente que salga a votar.
So, her name?
Okay. I got the first half, and then Arturo gave me the second half. So, I knew I should have studied Spanish better in high school. I knew it. All right.
Maria is one of the undocumented leaders from the city of Ventura who is upon herself and the rest of the team that is present for we need to get somebody she's a single mother. Her son is enrolled at Santa Barbara City College, and we see the importance of providing a great future for her son. So she wants to know, because she's potentially a DAPA recipient, if elected, what would you do? Because definitely the community, the undocumented community, is doing a lot of work in Ventura, California to get you elected, Senator, with all respect.
Well, congratulations on your son going to college. And I will use the executive powers. Obviously, again, we want Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform. That is the best approach. But if Congress does not do the right thing, I will build upon what President Obama has done and expand DAPA and DACA. Okay.
Buenas tardes, soy Irma Ramírez, no soy criminal y vengo a este país con muy buenas intenciones. I'm a professor of architecture at California State University, Pomona. And sí se puede, sí se puede. I've been teaching there for 14 years, and since 2002, tuition went from being something like $1,400 to today's tuition, which is over $5,000. Now that still seems like it may be affordable for some, but for our immigrant families, that is still a really big number. Our families are working families, we work hard. Our students are under a lot of pressure to have to work instead of going to school. So what does your future presidency can do for us?
Well, this is an issue I feel very, very strongly about. And it is an issue that I think the vast majority of the American people feel strongly about, everything that you've just said. And here is what the issue is. It's kind of what we call a no-brainer. It's not very complicated. We live in an increasingly competitive global economy. And if this country is going to succeed economically and in other ways, we need the best educated workforce in the world, right? If we were really smart, what we would be doing is urging everybody, not just the younger people, but the economy changes every day, your job changes every day. We would provide the opportunities for everybody to get the best education that they could. Right now, as you've just indicated, the cost of college is unaffordable to hundreds of thousands of young people. Others who go to college end up working. It's unbelievable. You probably see this every day. These are young people trying to do well in school, but they're working 20, 30, 40 hours a week. Now, how can you have the ability to do well in school when you're working so many hours, going to bed so late? Kids are working night shifts. All of that is crazy. It really is not good for this country. And that is why, as I said earlier, I believe that public colleges and universities like yours should be tuition free. And also, I believe that we have to deal with the crisis of student debt, right? A lot of the people who graduate or leave school are deeply in debt. And they have to pay off that debt year after year, sometimes decade after decade. And that means they can't afford to get a car. They can't get a house. They can't get married. They can't have children. That's crazy stuff. So what we have got to do is change our mentality regarding education. We should encourage and reward people. I want you to get a good education. I don't think you should be punished for getting a good education. Well, then people say, well, Bernie, you know, that sounds like a great idea. You're a nice guy. How are you going to pay for all that stuff? And that takes us to another issue, which distinguishes our campaign from Secretary Clinton's or anybody else's. We live in a country with more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth. The top 20 wealthiest people in America own more wealth than the bottom half of America. And what we have seen for the last 30 years is the middle class shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, while healthcare costs and education costs are soaring. And that's why so many middle class families are in trouble today. And I believe that it is time to tell the billionaire class, time to tell Wall Street they cannot have it all. That we are going to put a tax on Wall Street speculation that will raise more than enough money to make public colleges and universities tuition-free and substantially lower student debt. This is not a radical idea. Germany, you know how much it costs to go to college in Germany today? $0. You know how much it costs to go to college in Scandinavia? $0. Chile, in fact, has moved in that direction. These countries are smart. They are investing in their young people and in the future of their country. We should do the same.
Mr. Sanders, my name is Ronnie Veliz. I'm from the San Fernando Valley. I shared a little bit of my story earlier today. 40% of homeless youth in our country are part of the LGBT community. And that is a huge issue. Many of them, when I myself was homeless at 17 in Pacoima, Mission Hills, and San Fernando, not only I saw veterans who were homeless, but many of my queer and transgender youth who were undocumented. Can you, if elected president, we're working hard on that, can you commit for a path to citizenship to all undocumented LGBTQ youth who are homeless, and also with the more than 25 trans women of color who have been murdered last year? Can you make family acceptance and also trans awareness a priority as a public health issue?
But let me just say this. Our job is to end all forms of discrimination. Discrimination based on color, based on race, based on sexual orientation. In this country, we treat all people, LGBT, anybody else, with equality. And the benefits that go to anybody goes to everybody. And that is my pledge to you. Okay, I'll try. We have to get going fairly soon.
Two more questions.
Okay. Sir.
Senator Sanders, it's a pleasure to have you here in this iconic place for the Mexican community in East Los Angeles. My name is Guadalupe Gomez, member of the Zacatecano community. And I'd like to tell you that we share your views and your vision for America and the important issues for our community: education, health coverage for all, global warming. But we need your help, even beyond this election. But I want to assure you that we're going to do everything we can to put you in the White House because we want you as our president.
Thank you.
We need your help in repealing the 1996 law signed by President Clinton that criminalized our people, documented and undocumented, that has resulted in so many deportations and separations of many of our families, leaving their children behind, crying, with no one to care for them. Secondly, we need to get rid of the private detention centers that have profited and are profiting from the suffering of our people. Can we count on you with your help as president?
Okay, let me start with the second, and we'll go to the first. If you read our platform in terms of criminal justice, it is very clear that we have got to end corporate ownership of prisons and detention centers. Our job should be to keep people out of jail. If you are a corporation that owns a jail, what is your incentive? You make more money by getting more people into jail. All right? So we have got to end that, and I will end that. That is one of the important planks on our criminal justice reform. And the point that you made also, I mean, I mentioned that earlier. There is a lot of pain in the immigrant community. We heard it from Betty, and I have heard it from so many people. People who are afraid of being deported, who are afraid of being separated from their children, or children being separated from their parents. That is not what our immigration policy should be. We unite families, not divide families. Okay, yeah, Raul.
Buenas. Hello? Let me just, I can't add to what the senator's already said, but just to say that the immigration platform of the Sanders campaign and Bernie talks specifically to the question that if you don't dismantle and repeal those provisions of the 1996 laws that have led to the situation, you cannot have the kind of comprehensive immigration reform that we want. That has to be part of it. The other thing is to begin to end the bed quotas, the requirements that so many beds be filled for these for-profit prisons again. And I think one of the reasons that many of us have committed so strongly to Bernie is because we see the effect in our communities. And one of the things in all of Bernie's campaign is that he no los, como decía mi papá, no los nomás para taparle el ojo al macho. It has been sincere, real, and what Bernie says in this setting is the same that he says in another setting, and I think that's very, very important.
We have one last question. One last question.
Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Pérez Cruz.
Good afternoon. I'm Perez Cruz.
Y yo trabajo en Gage Vermont Car Wash.
I work in the car wash, Gage, Vermont.
Y tengo yo sindicato, yo estoy working local 675.
I'm with local 675.
Y sigo siguiendo los pasos.
I'm following the steps. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Y sí, bueno, no puede. Yo soy un trabajador inmigrante.
I'm an immigrant worker.
Y como yo y como bastantes que somos trabajadores inmigrantes.
I'm just one of many immigrant workers.
Y quisiera preguntarle a usted que cómo nos puede ayudar.
All I want to ask you is, how are you going to help us?
I'm going to help you. You are looking at somebody, and Raul and I have worked together on many issues over the years, but you're looking at somebody who has as strong a pro-worker voting record and lifetime activity of any member of the United States Congress. So for a start, I don't know what wages you are making now, but we will have or fight for a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour. We will fight for legislation that makes it easier for workers to join unions. And we are going to fight to make sure that every person in this country has health care as a right, not a privilege.
Just one last, thank you so much. One last question, Senator Sanders right here, Carlos Amador. Thank you so much for coming. I think one last question. Our communities are over-policed. Oftentimes, because of that reason, our communities, our members have convictions. And President Obama has said that he's reporting felons to our families. Our felons are our families. So, will you give folks, immigrants that have convictions, a second chance? And will you get ICE out of our jails?
Well, let me just. I don't want to give you a definitive answer other than to say we're going to take a very, very hard look at all aspects of criminal justice. We have a broken system right now, and you're right. Let me give you one example. One example. I'm not here to speak for marijuana or against marijuana, but what the story is that people in minority communities get arrested for possession of marijuana at a much higher rate than do people in white communities. All right, and that leads to criminal records and all kinds of problems. I am aware of the problems in ICE, all right, and I have talked to families who have been very negatively impacted by ICE, and yes, we will take a very, very hard look at that. And the last point that I want to make on criminal justice, maybe I should have made it earlier, is that if anybody in our country gets killed while in police custody, broadly speaking police custody, that will trigger under my administration an immediate investigation by the Federal Department of Justice. Right? So I thank you for raising those issues. I just don't want to give you a definitive answer, but we will take a look at criminal justice from A to Z, and I do know that minority communities are in fact over-policed. And I want to see in local police departments, I want to see those departments reflect the diversity of the communities that they serve. We want to end the militarization of local police departments. There's a lot of work to do, and I look forward to working with you to make those improvements. Thank you. Okay, thank you all very much.